Hello everyone, and welcome back. Out here on the loneliest roads in the world, truckers carry more than cargo. We carry nights we don't talk about, moments that stayed with us long after the engine cooled, moments that changed the way we look at the dark. If you're here, it means you're ready to ride with us again. Down the highways where radios go silent, headlights catch things that shouldn't be there, and every mile has its own secret. Before we roll into tonight's story, make sure you subscribe so you never miss another true trucker nightmare. And when it's over, drop a comment and tell me what you think really happened out there. Alright, let's shift into the dark. I've been running long haul in the north for a little over 15 years now. Tankers, flatbeds, reefers. If it needs to go up or down the Dalton, chances are I've hauled something like it. I've driven in whiteouts you couldn't see your own hood in, ice so slick you could feel the whole rig drifting sideways, and winds that shove 80,000 pounds like a kid's toy. I don't scare easy. Up here, fear gets you sloppy, and sloppy gets you dead. This run was supposed to be routine. Insulated food crates headed north. Nothing hazardous, nothing rushed. Just a standard night drive out of Coldfoot, pushing toward Deadhorse. It was a little after 1 a.m., midwinter, the kind of night where the sky doesn't look like sky at all. Just torn black cloth stretched over everything. The moon was a no-show, stars buried behind layered clouds. My headlights carved out 2 pale tunnels in front of me, catching the snow that drifted across the road in long, slow sheets. It looked like ghosts sliding under my bumper. Inside the cab, it was the usual mix of smells. Stale coffee, old fast food wrappers, diesel that never quite leaves your clothes, and that faint chemical cold leaking in from the reefer behind me. The dash lights glowed a soft orange, comforting in their own way. The heater rattled every time the blower kicked harder, but it was holding its own. Steady hum from the engine, slight vibration through the wheel, chains already snugged up before I left Coldfoot. Everything felt normal. The Dalton at night is a strange animal. You can go an hour without seeing another set of headlights. Mile markers blur into one another. The only company is the wind and whatever's on the CB. That night, the radio had gone mostly quiet. A few voices earlier talking about road ice closer to Adigan. A joke someone cracked about a rookie spinning out at 30 miles an hour. Then silence. Just static and the occasional crackle. I remember glancing at the clock, 1:07 a.m., as I came up on a long, gentle straightaway, about 50 miles or so north of Coldfoot. The road leveled out, and the forest pulled back a bit, opening into low, dark shapes of hills and scrub. I checked my mirrors out of habit. Left side, trailer riding true, snow kicking up in a light rooster tail. Right side, same thing, except there was a faint glow I didn't expect. It was green, not bright, not like a headlight or a reflection, just a soft, sickly green smear near the bottom edge of the mirror. At first I figured it was some kind of ice halo effect. Out here, your lights hit blowing snow and crystals, and you get all kinds of weird reflections and colors if you're tired enough. I blinked, leaned closer, rubbed my eyes. The glow was still there. I checked my speed, 47 miles per hour. Solid. I eased off the throttle a bit, watching the mirror. The green stayed right where it was, low and steady, tracking with me like it was attached to the trailer. No vehicles behind me, no headlights. Nobody had passed me in at least 40 minutes. I flipped the mirror heater on, thinking maybe it was frost catching the light funny. The glass cleared. The glow didn't. Started to separate then, like it was unraveling. What had been a small smear slowly stretched upward, rising along the edge of the mirror like some kind of reflection leak. It wasn't a beam. It was more like threads, thin green strands drifting upward out of the darkness, just beyond the road's shoulder. I checked the left mirror. Nothing there, just right side. I told myself it was just the aurora, low on the horizon, playing tricks. I've seen the lights do strange things, sliding and rippling low enough they look like they're touching the treeline. I killed the radio completely just to focus. The only sounds were the hum of the engine, the whisper of the tires over packed snow, and the occasional sigh of air brakes adjusting. Then the CB popped. Not a normal burst of static. It was like someone flicked a switch. Dead silence, then one sharp crack, and the speaker hissed alive. I reached for the mic out of reflex, but before my hand touched it, I heard it. Cole. It wasn't loud. It was a whisper, pulled thin, like someone standing behind a closed door, speaking into the crack. My name, stretched out in a way that made every hair on my arms stand up. I froze, hand hovering over the mic. The display showed an active channel, but no unit ID, no normal chatter. Just the soft hiss of open air. I swallowed hard, forced a breath. Breaker, who's calling? I said, trying to keep my tone flat. Silence. Then, under the static, the same voice, but softer, almost right against my ear this time. Cole. My name again. No call sign. No background engine noise, no music, no road hiss. Just that breathy sound, like the speaker was inside my cab instead of on the dash. That's when I looked back at the mirrors. The green lights were higher now, above the treeline. Not solid beams, but tendrils, thin, glowing strands reaching outward in slow motion. They weren't following the curve of the sky like the aurora. They were angled down, almost parallel with the road, leaning in toward my truck. I felt this cold wash through my chest that had nothing to do with the outside air. My hands tightened on the wheel. For a few seconds, I just kept driving, telling myself this was fatigue, bad coffee, maybe a migraine aura starting. Guys see things when they push too hard up here. Hallucinations aren't unheard of. Then the lights moved. They slid forward, along the right side of the rig, keeping pace with me. Not bouncing like reflections, not flickering with my headlights, just gliding. I watched them rise higher, swooping over the tops of the trees and drifting closer until they were almost level with my cab. I made a decision I still don't fully understand. I eased off the throttle, tapped the brakes, and brought the rig down to a crawl. The road was empty. No one behind me, no one coming toward me. I put on my hazards, brought her to a full stop in the lane, and set the brakes. The air release hissed loud in the quiet, like the truck was exhaling with me. The second the truck settled, the wind stopped. Not slowed down. Stopped. You don't realize how constant wind is on that highway until it isn't there. The world went dead. No hum against the cab, no whistling past the mirrors. Even the engine noise felt muted, like someone had thrown a thick blanket over the hood. The green lights drifted downward, slow and deliberate, until they were level with the ground. Then they spread out, fanning in a wide, glowing arc in front of me and out into the darkness, curving around until they formed a loose, shimmering circle. I could see them through the windshield now, faint lines of light etching the snow. The smell hit me then, metallic, not like blood, more like hot wiring, heated copper and burning dust, the kind of sharp tang you get when an old breaker trips or a motor seizes. It slid into the cab despite the vents being closed, sitting heavy at the back of my throat. I coughed, reflexively, and it tasted like I'd been chewing on aluminum foil. I don't remember deciding to get out. I just remember the door handle being cold under my glove, the dome light flicking on, and my boots crunching into the snow beside the truck. The air was wrong. It was cold, sure, but it was a flat cold. No bite of moving wind, no sting on my cheeks, just stillness, like the entire night was holding its breath. The engine sounded distant, like it belonged to some other truck far down the road. I stepped forward a few feet, squinting into the dark. The circle of green light was clearer from outside. It surrounded the rig at a distance of maybe 20-30 yards, low to the ground, rising and falling in thin strands like grass made of electricity. "Hello," I called out, feeling stupid the second the word left my mouth. There was no echo. The sound went nowhere. It just died a few feet in front of me, like the air swallowed it. Something moved to my left. I snapped my head around. Nothing there. Just the hulking shape of my trailer, frost coating the sides, my hazard lights blinking in slow, silent flashes of orange. I realized then that I couldn't hear them. No click from the relay, no faint buzz. Just light and no sound. I looked up. The sky above my truck was black, but beyond the glowing ring, farther out over the hills, the clouds were lit from within by that same sickly green. Not bright, just a pulse like a heartbeat. "Cole." The voice didn't come from the truck this time. Came from everywhere at once. Inside my head, behind me, under my feet. I felt it more than heard it. A thin pressure in my ears. My knees actually dipped for a second. That was enough. Training, instinct, fear, whatever you want to call it, kicked in. I turned, marched back to the cab, and climbed in as fast as I could without breaking into a sprint. The door shut with a dull thud, muffled like it was underwater. My hands shook slightly as I dropped into the seat and grabbed the wheel. The green light outside brightened for a moment, flaring at the edges of the circle. I flicked off the hazards, shoved the truck into gear, and eased off the clutch. For a terrifying half-second, nothing happened. The rig just sat there, engine rumbling low, unresponsive. Then, like something let go, the truck lurched forward. The instant the wheels started rolling, sound came back. Not gradually, like someone slammed everything on at once. Wind roared past the cab. The engine snapped back to full volume. The relay clicked, and the CB hissed with a blast of static so loud I winced. The green circle shattered into thin streaks of light that shot upward and disappeared into the clouds. I didn't look in the right mirror again for several miles. I drove half on instinct, half on adrenaline. Eyes locked on the road ahead, knuckles white on the wheel. My heart hammered in my chest, but inside the cab, everything looked normal. Dash light steady, gauges in the green, outside temperature hovering where it should be. Eventually, my breathing slowed enough that I could think. That's when I remembered the dash cam. I run a forward-facing cam and a small one mounted inside the cab, facing the driver's side window and door. Company policy on some loads, my own preference on others. I flicked my eyes up to the little red recording light. Solid. It had been rolling the whole time. I finished the climb, made it to a pullout I trust, and parked. Engine idling, heater humming. I pulled the SD card from the cam and slid it into the laptop I keep in the passenger seat. My fingers were still trembling slightly as I opened the folder. The footage showed exactly what I remembered at first. The dark road, the snow drifting, the glow beginning to appear in the right side window, the truck slowing to a stop, hazards flashing, me pulling the brake valve. Then the timestamp jumped. Not much, just a few minutes. From 1:19 a.m. to 1:27 a.m. No footage in between. No file corruption message. Just a clean cut like nothing had happened in those 8 minutes. I switched to the cab cam, heart thumping again. The view was a little grainy, but good enough. It showed me driving, glancing at the mirrors, my jaw tightening. It showed me reaching for the brake, the cab rocking slightly as the truck stopped. It showed me turning my head, as if listening to something. And then it froze. Not the video. The timestamp kept ticking, seconds rolling forward. But the image stayed the same, me, half turned toward the passenger side window, one hand still on the wheel. And next to me, outside the driver's side window, was a second shape. A silhouette. It was tall, too tall to be a normal person standing on the ground. Its head was level with the top of the window frame, narrow and off-center, like it was leaning down to peer inside. There were no details, no face, no clothing, just a darker shadow against the night, outlined faintly in green. The frame held like that for exactly 8 minutes on the timestamp. Then, at 1:27 a.m., the image snapped back to normal. I was alone again, looking forward, putting the truck into gear. I've run that route since. The Dalton doesn't give you a lot of options if you want to keep working. I still drive past that stretch of road, still see the snow slide in ghost sheets across the asphalt, still watch the mirrors like my life depends on it. I haven't seen the lights again, but every time the radio crackles with static a little too long, or I catch a flash of green on the edge of the glass, I remember that frozen frame, me in the cab, and something else leaning in close enough to fog the glass if it breathed. And I can't shake the feeling that whatever it wasn't just passing by. It knew my name. I've been hauling up and down winter roads in the Northwest Territories for just over 20 years now. Fuel, groceries, drilling equipment, you name it, I've dragged it across ice that shouldn't reasonably hold a loaded rig. I run a 16 Kenworth T680, sleeper cab, chains ready, block heater humming in anything below -20. I know my weights, I know my limits, and I know the rules for ice crossings like scripture. Keep it slow, keep it steady, never stop on the bridge. That night, I broke that last rule. It was early February, around 4 a.m., on Ice Bridge 43 over the Mackenzie River. You'd know it if you've driven it. Long, low stretch of ice they groom every season, marked with poles and reflective flags. The kind of crossing where you can feel the river underneath you even when you can't see a damn thing but white and darkness. Air temp was around -33 last I checked. My breath inside the cab left a faint frosting on the side window, even with the heater working overtime. CB was quiet. Too early for chatter, too late for company. The road getting there had been uneventful. Just the usual hum of tires over compacted snow, the vibration in the wheel, faint rattle from half-empty cup holders. I'd topped up coffee at the last camp, burned my tongue on the first gulp, then let it go lukewarm as the night dragged on. The cab smelled like stale coffee, diesel-soaked gloves, and that dry cold you only get in the north, clean and sharp like every molecule has edges. As I rolled up to the markers for Ice Bridge 43, I eased off the throttle, dropped my speed down to the posted limit 25 kilometers per hour. No unnecessary weight shifts, no hard braking. Lights on low beam so they wouldn't bounce glare back off the ice. The bridge ahead looked like an endless pale strip under my headlights, edges marked by thin poles with faded reflectors that caught the light and blinked weakly in the dark. You don't talk much at that hour. You just drive and listen, to your engine, to the wind, to whatever your gut is trying to tell you. I was maybe 30 meters onto the bridge when my headlights stuttered. Not a full flicker, not like a bad connection. More like someone ran dimmer switches up and down twice. Bright, dull, bright again. I checked the dash, no warnings, no battery light. Voltage looked fine. I frowned, shifted my hands on the wheel, and kept rolling. Sometimes the ice surface throws reflections and your eyes do the rest. Then I saw her, dead center of the bridge, maybe 100 meters ahead, standing right in the lane. At first it looked like some kind of snowdrift, a shape the plows had missed. But as I got closer, details sharpened. It was a woman, thin, bare legs, bare feet planted directly on the ice. A torn parka hanging off one shoulder, flapping despite the fact there was almost no wind. She was just standing there, facing me. No waving, no stumbling, just still. I felt that jolt of cold in my chest that has nothing to do with the air outside. Every instinct screamed at once. You don't stop on ice. You don't slam on the brakes either. You bleed speed gradually, keep the weight moving in a straight line. But all that training went out the window when my brain registered human body in front of truck. I hit the brakes. Not full panic, but heavier than I should have. The ABS kicked in, pedal pulsing under my boot. The trailer pushed for a second, then settled. I watched her in the beams as the rig slowed. My headlights dimmed again as they washed over her, like the light itself didn't want to touch her. Her eyes looked wrong at that distance. Too wide, too dark. Then, in the space of a blink, she wasn't there. 1 second, she was standing dead center in my lane. The next, my headlights were painting empty ice. The truck lurched to a stop about where she'd been. The cab swayed slightly, suspension catching up. I yanked the parking brake without thinking, even though you're not supposed to lock a rig down on an ice bridge. My heart hammered against my ribs in dull, heavy thuds. For a couple of seconds, all I heard was my own breathing and the low idle of the engine. Then the sound of the river came back to me. If you've never stood on river ice in the dead of winter, you might not know this, but it talks. Groans, pops, low cracking noises that vibrate up through your boots. The Mackenzie has this deep, stomach-level moan, like something rolling over in its sleep below you. I could hear it under the floor, under the engine, under everything. I threw on my high-vis jacket, grabbed my gloves, and stepped out into the night. The cold hit me like a physical shove, the kind that steals the breath from your lungs before you can swear about it. The air smelled clean, sharp, and faintly metallic, like I'd put my tongue against a battery. My boots crunched on frost, every step loud in the silence. The wind was barely a whisper, but the cold was so deep it bit any exposed skin instantly. My beard stiffened as the moisture in it started to freeze. The headlights carved two bright lanes across empty ice. No woman, no figure, nothing. I walked forward along the beam, boots echoing in the hollow quiet. My eyes scanned for footprints, for drag marks, for anything that said a human had been there. There wasn't a single depression in the frost except my own. The surface was smooth, freshly groomed. No scuffs, no bare patches. I stopped where I thought she'd been and just listened. The river groaned beneath me, a low, unsettling sound that rose and fell in the stillness. The truck idling behind me was a muted rumble, strangely distant, like it belonged to someone else. My breath drifted out in thick white plumes. I turned slowly, scanning the margins of the bridge, the edges where the ice met black nothing. If she'd bolted, I should have seen her. Bare feet on ice at -33 don't carry you far or fast. "Hello," I called out, feeling stupid as soon as the word left my mouth. The sound didn't travel right. It bounced off the cab behind me, then seemed to get swallowed by the open space. No echo, no carry, just gone. That's when I noticed the fog. It started as a suggestion, a faint haze curling around the back of the trailer. At first I wrote it off as exhaust catching the light. Then it thickened, rising up around the wheels and the undercarriage, too wide and too low to be just fumes. It rolled out along the ice on both sides, pale and slow, like something spilling from under the truck. The temperature dropped. I know how that sounds, but there's no other way to say it. One moment it was brutal but familiar cold. The next, it was like someone opened a door into something much worse. The air hit my lungs like knives. The inside of my nose froze instantly. My beard went from frost-tipped to solid in seconds, every hair turning to stiff wire. I could feel the moisture in my eyelashes crystallizing. I turned back toward the cab, suddenly very aware of how exposed I was standing in the middle of the bridge. The fog was thicker now, wrapping itself around the truck in soft, swirling bands. It muffled the engine noise, swallowed the edges of the headlights until they were just two glowing blurs. The reflective tape along the trailer glowed faint and blurred, like I was looking at my own rig through dirty glass. My footsteps sounded wrong on the ice, hollow and close, like I was walking in a small room instead of out in the open. The river's groan faded into the background, replaced by a faint, high hiss in my ears. I climbed back up into the cab, shut the door, and the fog clung to the glass for a moment before slowly sliding away. Inside, the heater was still blasting, but it felt like sitting in a truck that hadn't been warmed up yet. Cold-soaked, seat stiff, air thick and unmoving. My breath fogged the windshield more than it should have. I wiped a clear patch on the driver's side and checked my mirrors. That's when I saw her again. Not out on the ice. In the glass. In the right side mirror, the one angled so I can see the trailer and a sliver of the passenger door, there was a reflection that didn't belong. The interior of the cab looked normal at first. My empty passenger seat, my duffel bag on the floor, the faded fabric. Then the fog on the inside of the window cleared just enough, and I realized there was a figure sitting in the passenger seat. She was turned slightly toward me, shoulders angled, hair hanging wet and dark against the torn parka. Her face was pale in the reflection, too pale, like it was made of packed snow. Her eyes were wide and locked on mine through the mirror. Her mouth was open, stretched impossibly wide, like a silent scream frozen halfway. But in the actual seat next to me, there was nothing. I looked from the mirror to the seat, back and forth. Empty seat. Woman in mirror. Empty seat. Woman in mirror. The air inside the cab felt thick, heavy, like breathing through cloth. The smell of metal was stronger now, layered over the familiar scent of diesel and cold vinyl. I didn't move. I just sat there, one hand still on the wheel, the other hovering near the shifter, watching her stare at me through that piece of glass. Her lips didn't move, but as I watched, a thin line of frost began to creep along the inside of the passenger window, tracing the outline of where her head should have been if she were really there. That broke whatever trance I was in. I forced my eyes forward, fingers stiff as I released the brake and eased the truck back into motion. The engine responded with a low, reluctant growl. The fog outside peeled away from the cab as the rig began to roll, trailing behind me in tattered ribbons. I kept my gaze locked on the road ahead, refusing to look at the mirror again. The ice under the tires gave a long, shuddering crack, like the river didn't approve of whatever had just been standing on its surface. My shoulders were rigid, every muscle tight, as I crept across the rest of the bridge at a steady, too-slow crawl. The heater finally started to feel like it was working again about halfway over, thawing the stiffness in my fingers. My breath stopped fogging the glass so heavily. The metallic smell faded, leaving just the usual stew of truck cab odors. When my front tires rolled off the ice and onto solid road on the far bank, it felt like someone cut a wire inside me. A wave of exhaustion crashed in behind the adrenaline. I pulled off at the first safe widening beyond the bridge, set the brake properly this time, and killed the engine. The sudden silence rang in my ears. I sat there with the key in my hand, staring straight ahead, counting my heartbeats until they stopped sounding like they were trying to punch through my ribs. Eventually, I made myself look at the right mirror. Just my trailer. Just the road. No woman. No fog. No weird lights. The inside of the cab was clear, the passenger seat empty. The frost on the passenger window had melted back into a normal pattern, just a faint blur at the edges. Later, at the next camp, I checked my dash cam footage. Forward-facing and interior. The camera showed my approach to Ice Bridge 43, the truck slowing down, the beams hitting empty ice. No woman. No flicker in the lights. No fog. The temperature reading on the dash never budged from -33. On the interior cam, it showed me staring straight ahead, knuckles white on the wheel, lips moving like I was talking to someone. But the audio was nothing but low static for several minutes. The guys there chalked it up to fatigue, bad coffee, long night. I didn't argue. You learn quickly not to tell the whole truth if you want to keep working these roads. But every time I roll onto Ice Bridge 43 now, I feel it. That subtle drop in temperature that doesn't show on the dash. The way sound seems to thin out in the middle of the crossing. And if I let myself glance at the right mirror for a little too long, I sometimes see the faintest suggestion of a shape in the reflection of the passenger seat. Just enough to make me keep my eyes forward and my wheels moving. Because whatever was standing out there on the ice that night, it didn't care about the rules of the bridge. Cared about something else. And for a few miles out in the dark over that groaning river, it looked right at me. I run winter roads up in the territories, fuel, dry goods, whatever needs to get into places most people only see on maps. I've been doing it long enough to know that up here, the weather doesn't care how tough you think you are. The rules are simple. Respect the ice, respect the storms, don't outrun your fuel, and never trust anything you see in a wideout until you've checked it twice. This happened north of Inuvik 3 winters ago. I'd taken a late load, diesel and drums, headed toward a camp that didn't like to shut down no matter what the sky was doing. The rig was a beat-up but reliable Volvo, sleeper cab, auxiliary heater whining along, chains stowed but ready. It was one of those nights where the cold feels dry and tight, like the air itself might crack if you breathe too hard. By the time I passed mile 290, the storm was already building. It didn't come in dramatic, just a steady thickening of the air. At first it was light flurries flickering through my headlights, the kind you get used to ignoring. Then the wind picked up, and it was like someone started pulling a white curtain across the road, inch by inch. The world outside the glass became a tunnel. My headlights hit wall after wall of snow, flakes whipping sideways, distance collapsing until the high beams just made things worse. I dropped to low beams, slowed to a crawl 35, then 30, then 25. The tires hummed over packed snow, the wheel giving me that faint vibration that tells you the surface is hard but holding. The CB, which had been quiet for an hour, dissolved into soft static and stayed there. No voices, no traffic, just the occasional crackle like someone breathing into a dead microphone. In the cab, the air was thick with familiar smells. Diesel, stale coffee, sweat baked into the seat fabric. The heater pushed out dry warmth that never quite reached my feet. Every now and then I'd catch a whiff of cold sneaking in around the door seals, a tiny leak that made the back of my neck prickle. I checked my fuel gauge for maybe the 10th time. The needle was dipping lower than I liked. I'd planned to top up at the last reliable station, but a delayed loading and a "you'll make it, no problem" from dispatch had put me behind schedule. I pressed on, figuring I knew the route well enough. Now the storm had turned that little risk into a problem. Low whistle from the wind outside, soft hiss from the vent, the occasional clunk from something shifting in the sleeper. I kept my hands steady on the wheel, eyes locked on the faint suggestion of road between the snow bursts. The world beyond the hood existed in about 20 meters of visibility and then nothing, just flat white. Around mile 305, the storm went from bad to blind. One moment I could make out the vague edges of the road. The next it was just white in every direction. White sky, white ground, no horizon line. It felt like driving inside the beam of my own headlights, with nothing outside that cone of light. The only reason I knew I was still on the road was the subtle tilt of the truck when the wind pushed and the faint, rhythmic clunk as the tires hit the grooves carved by whoever had gone through before me. My fuel light flicked on. There's a particular feeling when that happens in conditions like that. Not panic exactly, just a tightening in your gut. A cold that has nothing to do with the weather. I did quick math in my head, remaining range, estimated distance, margin for error. The numbers weren't friendly. "Come on," I muttered, knuckles white on the wheel. "Give me something." The CB crackled once, then went dead again. No chatter, no calls, no weather updates. Just the storm. I was squinting into the whiteout, eyes burning, when I saw it. At first, it was just a smear of color in the snow haze. A faint glow off to the right, way out where nothing should have been. I blinked, thinking it was just my eyes playing tricks. But it grew stronger as I crept forward, yellow and red bleeding through the white. A sign materialized out of the storm like it was being developed in a darkroom. An old-style rectangle on a crooked steel pole, edges iced over, snow whipping around it. A neon tube flickered weakly behind cracked plastic, just bright enough for me to make out the words, "Fuel, coffee, heat." Underneath, in smaller, half-buried letters, "Mile 312 truck stop." I actually felt myself exhale. I'd heard old-timers talk about some forgotten station up that way, but the stories were half jokes, half warnings, and I'd never seen so much as a driveway when I ran this route in clear daylight. Right then, with the fuel light nagging and the storm chewing at the world, I didn't care how out of place it felt. I eased the rig toward the glow, following a faint suggestion of a lane branching off the main road. The snow there looked less churned up, like it hadn't seen traffic in a long time, but the neon ahead was solid now. An old, blocky sign, partially iced over, letters buzzing irregularly. The station emerged piece by piece. First the canopy, low, flat, rimmed with icicles, its undersides lit by yellowed fluorescence that flickered in slow, tired pulses. Then the pumps, two old island units with analog dials, paint peeling, hoses hanging like dead snakes. Beyond them, a squat building with fogged windows, a glass door plastered with faded decals. The whole place looked like it had skipped every decade since the 80s. I pulled in under the canopy, the engine echoing against the low ceiling. Snow hammered the outer edges of the light, but under there it was relatively clear, just a skin of frost over smooth concrete. I set the brake, the familiar sigh of released air louder in the cocoon of the station. For a moment I just sat there, listening. The storm's roar dulled under the canopy, turning into a steady hiss. The fluorescence buzzed softly. Somewhere, a loose metal panel clanged in the wind. The fuel light glowed accusingly on the dash. I climbed down, boots hitting the ground with a dull thud. The air under the canopy was colder than it should have been, given the semi-shelter, the kind of cold that sinks straight to your bones. The smell was wrong too. Not just diesel and exhaust, but dust, old oil, something stale, like a garage that hadn't been opened in years. Up close, the pumps looked even older. Analog dials behind cloudy glass, numbers frozen mid-rotation. A small sticker above one of them showed a fuel price that didn't belong to any year I'd been driving. I rubbed at the frost with my glove. The sticker crumbled under the touch, flaking away like dried leaves. I hesitated, then reached for the nozzle anyway. The hose was stiff, but it came free with a reluctant jerk. I jammed it into my tank, half expecting nothing, half expecting the whole thing to fall apart. The pump clicked. No motor hum I could hear, no mechanical whir, just a faint internal tick. The dial started to move, slow at first, then in a steady, smooth crawl. Liters climbed, dollars crept. I heard the faint gurgle of fuel flowing, felt the vibration through the hose. My breath fogged in front of me, hanging in slow-motion clouds. I glanced toward the building. Light seeped through the grimy windows, a weak, amber glow. The neon sign above the door, open, flickered between on and off with no pattern I could follow. I decided I owed someone money. Leaving the nozzle in place, I walked toward the door. The storm was a blurred wall just beyond the edges of the canopy, the snow like static on an old TV. My boots left clear prints on the thin frost, each step loud in the quiet. The glass door resisted when I pulled, then gave with a dry scrape, like it hadn't moved in a while. A bell above the frame gave a single, strangled jingle. Inside, the temperature didn't change much. It was marginally warmer, but the cold lived in the walls and floor. The air smelled like dust, old coffee, and something sweet and spoiled buried deep under it all. Fluorescent strips buzzed overhead, casting a drained, yellow light. The shelves were mostly bare. Faded chip bags puffed with air, cracked plastic on candy displays, a row of motor oil bottles with labels from brands that didn't exist anymore. An old cooler hummed in the corner, its glass fogged on the inside, a few dark shapes barely visible through frost. A corkboard by the entrance held curled, sun-faded flyers for local events with dates more than a decade old. A wall clock above them ticked, second-hand jumping in uneven jerks, but the time it showed didn't match my watch or the truck's dash. It read 11:16, its hands twitching in place like they couldn't decide whether to move. At the back, behind a scarred counter, stood a man. He looked like he'd been poured out of the same decade as the rest of the station. Plaid shirt under a grease-stained vest, gray hair combed back in thin streaks, lines worn deep into his face. His eyes were pale, the color hard to place in the bad light. He didn't look surprised to see me. He didn't look much of anything. For a second, I just stood there, hand on my wallet, trying to place what felt so off. He didn't blink. "Evening," I said, voice sounding too loud in the dead air. He nodded, slow, like the movement had to travel a long way to get to his muscles. His gaze slid past me to the door, then back. "Fuel's on the house," he said. His voice was flat, but it carried, clear in the hush. No accent I could pin down. The words felt like they'd been spoken 1,000 times, worn smooth by repetition. I frowned. "I'm not looking for charity. Just need to top off and survive that mess out there." He tilted his head, just a little. "Storm's not safe," he said. "You shouldn't be out in it." I almost laughed, but it died before it made it to my mouth. Something about the way he said it made the back of my neck tighten. I reached for my wallet, more for something to do than anything else, fingers numb inside the glove. "Really?" I said. "Let me pay. Company'll cover it." I glanced down to flip it open. The whole exchange took maybe 2 seconds. When I looked up, the counter was empty. No footsteps, no door chime, no rustle of movement. One heartbeat he was there. The next there was just worn wood, a dusty register, and the space where he'd been standing. An empty mug sat near the edge. A ring of dark residue dried around the inside like it hadn't been washed in years. The air felt thicker, harder to pull into my lungs. The buzzing lights seemed louder. Somewhere behind the wall, the building creaked, a sound like old bones settling. I turned a slow circle, scanning the room. No back door. No open office. No place for someone to slip away that fast without me hearing it. The clock on the wall stuttered, its second hand jerking between 2 marks. The hairs on my arms rose under my jacket. I didn't call out. I just walked backward to the door, pushing it open with my shoulder, bell giving that same strangled jingle as the storm's hiss rushed in. Outside, under the canopy, the pump handle had clicked off. The nozzle still sat in my tank. I pulled it free and stared at the gauge on my truck. Full. Not enough to get me to the next station. Full. Past where it should have been if I was being honest. The fuel light was gone. The engine idled steady, unaffected. My boots crunched as I turned around to check the ground. Only my prints led from the truck to the building and back. No other tracks. No overlapping steps. No old paths. Not even a hint of a footprint under a dusting of snow. Just my marks and the faint texture of wind-driven frost. The storm beyond the canopy roared and howled, but under there it was dead still, like the air was holding its breath. That's when I noticed the sign again. From this angle, looking back toward the road, the fuel, coffee, a heat sign was dark. No neon glow, no flicker, just a cracked rectangle coated in ice, hanging crooked on its pole. The only light was what bled from my headlights and the tired fluorescence above the pumps. I didn't wait around to figure it out. I climbed back into the cab, slammed the door, and put the truck in gear. The heater felt stronger now, blowing warmth that finally started sinking into my gloves. I eased out from under the canopy and back toward where the road should be. In the mirrors, the station receded into the storm, a dim shape swallowed by white, then gone. Once I was back on the highway, the world narrowed again to snow and headlights and the rhythm of the wipers. The storm was still bad, but the fuel gauge stayed solid, reassuring in its own quiet way. I drove until the sky began to lighten with that gray-blue hint of morning. I didn't see another set of taillights until I reached the next camp. Later, parked and half-thawed, I pulled the SD card from the dash cam. Habit, curiosity, maybe something else. I loaded the footage onto my laptop, scrubbed through to the right timestamp. It showed me driving into the storm, visibility dropping. The road ahead blurred into white, my speed falling as the conditions worsened. Then, at a certain point, the truck just slowed and stopped on the shoulder. No neon, no canopy, no pumps, no building, just swirling white around the rig, headlights struggling against the storm, trailer wobbling slightly in the wind. I watched as the recorded version of me climbed down, disappearing into the snow haze beside the cab. A few minutes later, I reappeared, climbed back in, and pulled away, leaving a set of fresh tracks in otherwise untouched snow. From the dash cam's point of view, I'd stopped for no reason at mile 312. No station, no sign, nothing. I didn't show the footage to anyone. When guys swap stories about weird nights on the ice roads, I just listen when mile 312 comes up. Hear them joke about the ghost stop old-timers used to mention. Some swear they've seen a neon flicker in the distance on bad nights. Most say it's just fatigue and snow playing tricks. Maybe they're right. All I know is, when the weather turns and the CB goes quiet up there, part of me listens for that buzzing fluorescent hum and looks a little too hard into the white, half expecting that crooked sign to bleed out of the storm again. And if it ever does, I'm still not sure whether I'll stop. Because once something fills your tank for free out in the middle of nowhere, you start to wonder what it's really trying to keep you away from. I've been pulling loads up in the subarctic long enough that -40 feels more like a number on paper than something you can explain. Fuel, pipe, groceries for camps nobody's heard of. If it needs to go where the map turns white, someone like me drags it there. This happened in January 3 winters back, on a run heading north toward a cluster of exploration camps past the tree line. It was one of those stretches they only half admit exists, old mining roads welded onto frozen highways, straight lines through nothing. My rig was a 14 Peterbilt with a sleeper and a fully loaded tanker behind me. At that temperature, diesel turns to jelly if you don't keep it circulating. You stop too long, you stay there. It was about 1:15 in the morning. Outside temp on the dash read -40, and I knew the sensor was protected enough that real air was worse. The sky was clear but useless. No moon, just brittle stars scattered over a black sheet. My headlights pushed out 2 pale cones over hard-packed snow. The road looked almost dry, but there was that faint sheen you learn to respect. Tires hummed low. Steering wheel trembled just enough to tell me the surface was solid. Inside the cab, it smelled like every long run. Burnt coffee in the travel mug, diesel soaked into my jacket, a hint of vinyl warmed by the heater. The vents pumped out hot air, but the glass still bled cold. My fingers rode the wheel in thin gloves, palms sweating, backs of my hands feeling the chill seeping through. The CB had been dead for an hour. Just soft static and the occasional click when someone keying up changed their mind. Past a certain point up there, your world shrinks to engine noise, wind over the cab, and whatever your own head decides to dig up. I remember checking the GPS. Not that it's worth much that far out, just a breadcrumb trail on an empty grid. Route line hugged the main road. Off to the east, there was a thin gray vein labeled simply, Mining Access, Decommissioned. I knew the companies had pulled out years ago. No lights out there. No crews. Just rusted equipment under snow and a road nobody maintained. That's when the radio snapped alive. Not eased in. Not a gradual rise in background noise. 1 second it was static, the next it was like someone dropped me into the middle of a transmission. Broken down near repeat. Broken down near the old mining road. Anyone northbound copy? Engines dead. Temps dropping fast. The voice was male, mid-range, flattened by static and distance. My hand went for the mic before I even processed the words. Northbound tanker at mile 214, I said. Say again with your location. The radio hissed, popped once, then cleared. Rig disabled near the old mining road access. Can't get her to turn over. Temps are, it's too cold. Please. A breath. Then more clearly, don't leave me in the dark. Don't leave me in the dark. The last sentence stretched out like the signal was dragging it. I glanced at the GPS again. Mining access road. Less than 20 kilometers ahead, branching east. My gut tightened. At minus 40, a guy with a dead truck doesn't have long before the cab turns into a freezer, especially if the wind starts pushing. This is Mitch in a northbound tanker, I said. I'm about 20 clicks out from that access. What's your mile marker? Can you see any signs? Static chewed through the beginning of his reply. No signs, just the post. I can see your lights. Please, don't leave me in the dark. That last line came through perfectly. Too perfectly. The tone didn't match the words. No panic, no rush, just a flat, pleading rhythm. Like something he'd said 100 times already. My eyes flicked to the mirrors. Nothing behind me but empty road and my own taillights glowing off the snow haze. This channel's quiet, I said, voice firmer. Training overrode unease. Any other units copy a distress call near the mining road. Come back. Silence. Just the wind outside and the low grind of the engine holding speed. No other voices. No, I got him. Nothing. I swapped channels, tried the company line. Dispatch, this is Unit 7 to 9 northbound. Getting a distress call about a breakdown near the old mining access. You see any other units out here on the board? There was a pause on the other end. Shuffle of papers, faint background noise. Then my dispatcher's voice came through, compressed and distant. -7 to 9. You're our only rig in that sector right now. You sure it's not bleed over from somewhere else? As if on cue, the other voice cut back in over my still-keyed mic, loud enough that I flinched. Don't leave me in the dark. Don't leave me in the dark. Same cadence. Same breath in the same place. Like someone replaying a line off tape. Did you hear that? I snapped. All I got is static, Mitch, dispatch answered. If you're hearing something we're not, it's local. Use your judgment. Call in if you stop. I let go of the mic. The CB slid back into low hiss. The engine throbbed through the floor, familiar and grounding. My gloves creaked as I tightened my grip on the wheel. Use your judgment. Up there, that usually means you're on your own. The next 15 kilometers stretched. The road stayed straight, flanked by low, scrubby trees half buried under waves of snow. Headlights picked out mile markers, each one a lonely spine sticking up from the drift. The stars blurred a little as the windshield frosting crept back in from the corners, caught quickly by the defroster. The voice returned twice more. The second time, it was broken fragments folding over each other. Engines dead. Old mining road. It's so dark. Don't leave me in the dark. I asked for his unit number, his name, anything I could use. Each time, the answer came back partially eaten, like something had chewed off the details before they reached me. The third time, all I heard was breathing. Shaky. Too close. Then softly, "I can see your headlights. You're almost here. Don't leave." The transmission cut off mid-word. No carrier drop, no click. Just gone. My chest felt tight. I checked the GPS again as the route line crept toward the small gray slash labeled mining access. No other roads out here. No place for a hoaxer to hide and get clever. "All right," I muttered to the empty cab. "We'll do this the old way." The turnoff appeared exactly where it should have. A narrow cut in the snowbank on the right, marked by a single bent post with a half-buried, rusted sign. My headlights washed across it, picking out faded letters under ice. Mining RD, authorized access only. There were no fresh tracks leading in. The mouth of the road was windswept, drifts smoothed flat. No ruts, no tire grooves, just white. I brought the rig down to a near stop, hazard lights ticking their slow, orange rhythm. The tanker behind me creaked as it settled. I rolled forward just enough to angle my front end slightly toward the access, then set the brake. The air tanks exhaled in 2 sharp bursts. Outside, the night pressed in. A solid, black wall beyond the beam. "Breaker, this is 7 to 9 north at the mining access," I said into the CB. "If you're still out here, flash your hazards. Honk. Do anything." The radio answered with a long, thin line of static. Then, faintly right under it, "Don't leave me in the dark." No click, no ID, just that line again, quieter, like it was being whispered into the back of my head instead of the speaker. I shut the radio off. It made no difference. The cab didn't get any quieter. If anything, the silence thickened. I pulled my parka from the passenger seat, zipped it up to my throat, jammed my hat down, and slipped my hands into heavy mitts. The cold hit harder when I cracked the door. An instant knife across my face, a burning in my nostrils that made my eyes water. The air smelled like nothing. Pure, dry, killing cold. Snow crunched under my boots as I climbed down. The tanker ticked behind me, metal shrinking under the temperature. My breath rolled out in huge, slow plumes that hung in the air like ghosts. I walked toward the mouth of the mining road. My flashlight beam cut into the darkness in a sharp white cone. It hit the sign, the first 10 meters of churned snow and ice, then nothing, just a corridor between drifts disappearing into black. No tracks, no parked rig, no glow of hazard lights struggling through the night. I stepped out a few meters onto the access, listening. At -40, sound travels strangely, dull and sharp at the same time. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, the faint hiss of my breath. There was no engine, no idling truck, no struggling starter, just the tundra's vast, indifferent silence. "You got eyes on me?" I called, feeling stupid talking into the dark. "You said you could see my headlights. Where are you?" The wind answered with a low, almost conversational sigh, slipping past the bank and under the frame of my tanker. Snow swirled around my boots. Something brushed against the edge of my hearing then, too faint to be called a sound. More like the memory of one, a scrap of tone, a rhythm. "Don't leave me in the dark." It was so soft I couldn't swear it wasn't my imagination. It came from nowhere and everywhere at once. The access road, the open highway, the thin space between my hat and my skull. I turned full circle with the flashlight. White, black, rusted sign. My own rig sitting at an angle, hazard lights blinking mechanically into the empty night. The cold bit deeper, little needles stabbing through my jeans, into my thighs. My beard had gone stiff around my mouth. My toes were starting to go from warm to numb. I backed up slowly, boots sliding on the packed surface. Something about that empty road felt wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. Not dangerous in the usual sense, no avalanche, no visible drop, no broken ice. Just wrong, like standing on the threshold of an open door in a pitch-black house, knowing someone is inside but not hearing a single sound. When I reached the cab, my fingers fumbled the grab handle. They were clumsier than they should have been, tingling, sliding toward burning. I hauled myself up, sealed the door, and immediately shoved my mitts under the heater vent. Pins and needles exploded as blood started to return. The cab should have felt safe, familiar, but the space behind the seats, The bunk area, the little dark corner where the light didn't reach, suddenly felt occupied. My hand went to the radio switch. I stared at it for a long second, then left it off. I put the truck in gear, released the brake, and eased back onto the highway. The tanker groaned as it followed, chains clanking softly. The mining access slid out of my headlights and was gone, swallowed by darkness as if it had never been there. I didn't breathe easy. Not yet. 10 minutes later, the sky ahead picked up a faint glow. Some distant camp. A cluster of security lights pushing weak halos into the black. My shoulders began to unclench. The heater finally chased the deep cold from my bones. Then, as I passed an old, dead kilometer marker leaning at an angle, something whispered at my left ear. Not from the radio. That was still off. Switch clicked down, little orange indicator dark. Not from the blower vents. The sound had weight, direction. It came from the driver's side window, inches from my head, separated from the outside world by a sheet of double-pane glass lined with frost. Don't leave me in the dark. No static, no distance, no compression. It sounded like a man standing on the running board, face pressed to the glass, lips almost touching it. I flinched so hard the truck wandered half a foot before I corrected. My heart slammed against my ribs, breath catching in my throat. The world outside the windshield blurred for a second, then snapped back into focus. I didn't look at the window, didn't need to. I could feel it, that sense you get when someone stands too close behind you in a grocery line. Presence. Intent. The hair on my neck rose under my collar. I kept my eyes straight ahead, knuckles white, the cab's familiar interior suddenly foreign. Slowly, centimeter by centimeter, whatever was outside moved along the glass. I didn't hear footsteps on the metal, no knock, no scrape, just that proximity sliding past my shoulder. The whisper came again, slightly behind me now, like it had drifted with it. Don't leave me. The last word frayed, pulled apart like thread. By the time it reached my ears, it was barely sound, just feeling. Then it was gone. Not faded, gone. The cab felt bigger, emptier. The sound of the engine surged back up in my awareness. The blower fan rushing, the faint rattle of a loose panel. My own breathing sounded harsh and too loud. I risked a glance left. Frost clung to the inside seam of the window, but the glass was clear enough. Nothing there but night and the faint reflection of my own pale face, eyes too wide. I drove another 30 kilometers before I trusted my own muscles enough to pull into the camp yard. When I finally killed the engine, the sudden silence pressed at my eardrums until the ticking of cooling metal filled it. I didn't sleep much that day. A week later, sitting in a break room with bad coffee and worse fluorescent lighting, I mentioned the mining access to one of the old-timers just to see his reaction. Didn't say what I'd heard. Didn't say what I felt. He stared at his mug for a long heartbeat. Had a guy break down out that way years back, he said quietly. Before your time. Starter died. Temps dropped hard. Radioed for help, but the storm was chewing the signal. By the time anyone got close, the truck was snowed over and he was gone. They said his last transmission was something about not wanting to be left in the dark. He shrugged it off after that. Old story. Long time ago. I didn't tell him that the voice I heard didn't sound like it was coming from miles away through a bad antenna. It sounded like it had finally caught up. I still run that highway, still pass the crooked mining access sign on clear days and see nothing but an old road buried in white. But when the temperature plunges and the CB picks up thin, broken whispers where there should be silence, I don't touch the dial. I just keep driving, because whatever is still out there at -40, near that abandoned road, isn't calling for just anyone. It's calling for whoever will answer, and I've already proven that I will. I've been running the winter roads up near Tuktoyaktuk long enough that I can tell wind speed by the way the cab shivers and guess temperature by how fast my breath fogs the glass. Fuel, food, equipment for camps no one outside the maps cares about. If it has to hug the Arctic coast in the dark months, guys like me are the ones dragging it there. This was late January a few years back. Middle of the dark season. The kind of night where evening and morning don't mean much, just different shades of black. I was hauling a mixed load, drums, food pallets, some replacement parts headed to a site east of Tuck. The ice road ran like a scar across the land, following frozen inlets and buried tracks. Out there, near the coast, you don't expect to see much besides snow, ice, and maybe the faint orange glow of a far-off gas flare if you're lucky. It was about 1 a.m. The outside temp on the dash read -32 degrees Celsius and dropping. No wind at first, just that heavy, pressing stillness you get when the air is too cold to move. My headlights carved tunnels through drifting ice crystals, making the world ahead look like I was driving through a shaken snow globe. The only other light was the faint smear of my running lights reflected off the road and the dim halo of the dash. Inside the cab, it was cramped and familiar. Heater rumbling near full blast, blowing that dry warmth that smells like dust baked onto plastic. The air carried the usual mix: diesel from my jacket, stale coffee from the travel mug, a lingering whiff of old food wrappers I kept meaning to throw out. The wheel vibrated steady under my hands, the road telling me I was on hard-packed snow with the occasional ripple of old ruts. Every now and then, a little creak from the sleeper bunk, like the truck was settling its bones. The CB had gone quiet an hour back. Last chatter was a southbound rig calling their position near Inuvik, then just static and the occasional pop when the antenna caught something out of range. That kind of silence gets into your head. Your world shrinks to the hum of your engine and whatever you can see in the beam. Out along that stretch of Arctic coast, you don't see houses. No farms, no towns, nothing but endless white and low, dark shapes where the land rises. Maybe a temporary shack or a fuel cache if you know where to look, but nothing with a front porch and curtains. So when I saw the cabin, I knew right away something was wrong. It started as a tiny, warm smear of color on the horizon. At first I thought my eyes were messing with me. The nights are long up there and your brain starts wanting things. Light, company, anything that isn't black and white. But as I rolled closer, the smear resolved into something solid. A square. A cabin-sized shape, off to the right of the road, maybe 200-300 meters out across the snow. And in one window, near the center, a soft yellow glow. Not LED white, not floodlight blue, old light, tungsten, lantern light. My rational brain kicked in first. Ranger outpost, maybe. Emergency shelter. I knew there were old structures sprinkled along some routes, hunters' cabins, old fishing shacks, things people left behind when the world moved on. Most of them were boarded up, buried, or collapsed. But a lit one? Out here? My fuel was fine, but my hands were stiff, and my eyes burned from staring into the beam. The idea of a warm room, even for 5 minutes, sank its hooks into me. I slowed a hair. The road beneath me shifted from lake ice smooth to the subtle bump of frozen land under snow. Tires hummed a slightly different note. I flicked my eyes between the road and the cabin. From a distance, it looked almost cozy. A simple rectangular shape, low roof with a heavy drift piled along one side. Smoke? Maybe. Could have been just blown snow. But there was a faint darker band above the roofline that might have been something rising into the air. The window glowed steady, a single square of yellow, like a kitchen light left on. I grabbed the CB anyway just to test my brain. Any units northbound near Tuck see a cabin with a light on the east side of the road? I asked, looking at a structure around mile. I glanced at the dash. Mile 167. Somebody know if that's a shelter? The radio hissed softly. No response. Just the sound of distance. I let the mic fall back into its clip. As I eased past the point closest to the cabin, my headlights washed just far enough to sketch in more detail. The structure was small, maybe one room, with a sagging porch half buried in snow. The front door was completely blocked by drift, the steps invisible. Boards on the outer wall had warped and twisted, dark streaks running down where meltwater had frozen in place. The roofline wasn't quite straight. A slight dip near the middle, like something inside was giving up. But that window, the glass was frosted around the edges, but the center pane glowed with that soft, unwavering yellow. Warm, inviting, wrong. My hands tightened on the wheel. At -32, with a wind picking up, there's no such thing as an unwatched, unwarmed cabin with a light accidentally left on. Fuel is precious. So is fire. And that door. No one had gone in or out of that place in a long time. The snow said so. Smooth. Unbroken. Wind-carved. No footprints. No ski tracks. No snow machine ruts. Just white, untouched. The road straightened out ahead, pulling my headlights away from the cabin. The light in the window slid out of my main view, left to the periphery. I should have kept going. Instead, I slowed more. My rig shuddered as the speed dropped, tires crunching lightly over rougher snow. There was a pullout flagged on the GPS a short distance ahead, a wider section of road trucks used to pass each other. I decided I would stop there, give myself a better look, decide with both hands on the wheel instead of half my attention in the mirrors. I eased into the pullout and set the brake. The air tank sighed, moisture in the lines crackling faintly. The engine idled with a deep, steady thrum that vibrated up through my boots. Outside, the Arctic night pressed against the glass in all directions, a weight you could feel more than see. I turned off my headlights. The world beyond the windshield went black. For a moment, I regretted it. Your heart does this weird jump when the only thing separating you from total void goes dark. But as my pupils dilated, I saw what I wanted to see. The cabin's window, glowing in the distance. With my lights off, it was even clearer. A single square of yellow, alone in an ocean of black and blue. No other lights on the coast. No stars low enough to confuse it. Just that one impossible window. I stared at it hard, waiting for my brain to blink, to admit it was a reflection or a trick. It didn't change. If anything, the color seemed to deepen, like there really was a fire or a lantern burning behind that glass. The truck cab felt colder, even though the heater kept blowing, the vents ticking softly as plastic expanded and contracted. I told myself I wasn't going all the way there, just going to stand outside for a minute, see if there was smoke, tracks, any sign it was an active outpost. Call it in if it was. Chalk it up to an odd story if it wasn't. I grabbed my parka, zipped it to my chin, pulled on heavy mitts and my hat. Before opening the door, I flicked my parking lights back on. A faint glow at the edges of the hood, enough to mark my presence if anyone happened along. The instant I cracked the door, the cold punched in. It smelled like nothing, pure, empty air that sucked the heat out of your lungs. My breath billowed out in thick white clouds. The sound of the engine grew sharper without the glass, the low-frequency rumble cutting into the silence. Snow squeaked under my boots as I climbed down. The sky above the coast was a deep, oily blue-black. No aurora that night, just darkness and the faint suggestion of a horizon where it met the frozen ocean. I stood by the truck, watching the cabin. The light in the window stayed steady. No flicker, no change in intensity. Too steady for an open flame. Some part of my brain whispered. Too warm for LED. Too old for this place. I took a few steps off the packed pullout, boots sinking into softer snow. It swallowed some sound, leaving only the distant growl of my idling engine and the small crunches of my own movements. From this angle, the cabin's age was more obvious. The siding leaned. One corner of the roof had lost shingles that now formed a half-buried mound near the base. The snow piled against the door was solid, layers of old storms fused into a single slope. Wind had carved sharp waves into it. No one had punched a hole through that in months, maybe years. The light flickered, just once. Quick, almost indignant sputter. Bright, dim or bright, like an old lantern running low, then catching again. My chest tightened. Then it moved. Not much at first. Just a slow drift deeper into the room, pulling away from the window. The glow softened around the edges, as if it were sliding backward into a larger darkness. Then it began to travel sideways, crossing the interior of the cabin. There was no silhouette, no shadow of a body carrying it. Just a roundish orb of yellow-white, about the size and height you'd expect from a lantern held in someone's hand, but with no one holding it. The light floated from the window across to what must have been the far wall. As it moved, it cast uneven beams through warped glass, the shadows stretching strange angles across the snow outside. For a second, it passed behind something, a hanging shape, maybe, or a post, and the pattern in the glass made it look like a figure moving across the room. My skin crawled under my layers. When it reached the far side, the light paused, hanging there, then dipped slightly, like someone had set it down on a low surface. The glow dimmed, grew stronger, then pulsed. Once, twice, 3 times. Each pulse came with a strange, almost physical feeling in the air, like pressure changes before a storm. I realized my jaw was clenched so tight it hurt. There was a sound then, so faint I wasn't sure it was real. A tiny creak carried on absolutely still air. Not metal. Wood. The noise an old plank makes under weight. The wind wasn't blowing. My breath drifted straight up in narrow columns. Somewhere between my ears and my gut, survival instinct threw up a red flag. You don't go into someone else's cabin uninvited. You definitely don't go into a cabin that doesn't want you there. And that place radiated "stay away" in a language older than signs and fences. I took a single step backward. The light rose. Not a lot, just a foot or so. Enough to clear whatever surface it had been on. Then it turned. There was nothing to turn, but that's the only way I can describe it. The glow shifted, and every instinct I had screamed that it was now facing me. The yellow deepened, center brightening, edges sharpening into a more focused beam. It pushed closer to the window, glass catching the glow and flaring briefly. The interior of the cabin remained a black box. Only the light had form. I stood frozen in the snow, breath loud in my ears, eyes locked on that floating glow. It moved toward the window in a slow, unnaturally smooth glide. No bobbing, no sway like someone's arm. The light touched the glass from inside, smearing across it like liquid. Frost on the pane melted in a small circle, droplets catching fire and refracting the glow in tiny, trembling arcs. For a moment, it felt like something was looking back. A cold, tight discomfort squeezed my chest. My fingers clenched inside my mitts, useless. The light pushed harder. For a split second, I thought it would come through the glass. Instead, it snapped back into the room like someone had yanked it on a string. The glow shrank, concentrated into a tighter sphere, then drifted away from the window again. This time faster, more deliberate. It moved toward where a back wall should have been, slowed, then dropped out of sight, like someone had taken a lantern down a set of stairs into a cellar that shouldn't exist in permafrost. The cabin went dark. Not dim, not less bright. Dark. The kind of black that feels like it erases what was there. The afterimage of the window burned on my retinas. An empty yellow square that faded into nothing. The night pressed in. The only light left was the dull glow from my truck's parking lamps and the faint spill from my dash through the windshield. I didn't stay to see if it came back. I walked careful, measured steps back to the cab. My boots felt heavier. The air felt thicker, like moving through wool. The closer I got, the more I could feel my truck like a living thing, warmth leaking from its seams, engine idling steady, a breathing presence in a place that had too much silence. I've been running winter roads up north long enough to know what belongs out there and what doesn't. Moose in the lane, caribou herds cutting across, wolves hanging back on the edges of the beam. None of that bothers me. You learn how they move, how they watch the truck, where they'll break and run. What I saw that night wasn't any of that. This was on the ice road about halfway between Inuvik and Tuktoyaktuk, mid-February, just past midnight. I was hauling a mixed load on a triaxle flatbed. Crates strapped down tight, chains singing a little whenever I hit a ripple in the ice. Outside temp on the dash hovered around -30 degrees Celsius, with wind chill doing worse things the sensors never admit. Sky was clear but empty. No aurora. Just a ton of stars stabbed into a sheet of black. The ice road was in good shape that night, hard, smooth, the kind of surface that hums under your tires instead of fighting you. My headlights stretched out in twin tunnels, picking up the reflective stakes along the sides and the flat, pale sheen of the frozen channel. Inside the cab, it smelled like tired stuff. Stale coffee, old sweat, diesel soaked into my jacket, that faint plastic and dust smell from the dash heater blowing on high. CB was mostly dead. Last chatter I'd heard was a southbound unit calling his position near town. After that, just low static and the occasional crackle when the antenna caught a gust of wind. I had the volume turned down enough that it was more background hiss than sound. I was running about 50 kilometers per hour, steady, safe speed for the weight and ice. Hands loose on the wheel, but not relaxed. Up there, you never really relax. Your body learns to hold a little tension in reserve. That's when I saw it. Maybe 100 meters ahead, dead center of my lane, standing perfectly still in the middle of the ice. A wolf, big one, white as the road, but my lights caught enough texture in its fur to outline the shape. Broad chest, thick winter coat, long legs. It didn't slink out of the darkness or trot in from the side. It was just there in the beam, like the truck and the headlights and the last 15 seconds of road didn't exist for it. I eased off the throttle. You never slam brakes on ice unless you plan on meeting your own trailer sideways. The engine dropped to a lower rumble. Jake brake quiet. The wheel vibrated in my hands as the rig bled speed. My breath fogged the windshield a little until the defroster cleared it. The wolf didn't move. It faced me straight on, shoulders squared to the truck, head lifted slightly. Close enough now that I could pick out details. Thick ruff around its neck, ears forward, jaws closed. Its fur looked too clean, like snow that hadn't been touched yet. No mud, no ice clumps, no frost on its muzzle. Most animals will brake for an 80,000-pound truck bearing down on them with lights blazing and engine growling. This one didn't even flinch. I gave the air horn a short blast. The sound shattered the quiet, bounced off the open ice, came back thinner. In the mirrors, I saw my trailer lights pulse with the vibration. The wolf turned its head. Slowly. Too slowly. Every vertebra in its neck might as well have been rusted metal for how unnatural that motion looked. It didn't swivel like an animal tracking movement. It pivoted in tiny increments, eyes dragging across the front of the truck as if they had to catch up to the rest of the skull. My skin crawled under my thermals. The headlights hit its eyes full on. They flashed back the usual reflective animal shine at first, pale green-white, like twin coins. Then, just for a second, there was something under it. Not color exactly, more like depth, too much awareness. I've seen wolves stare at me from the tree line, weighing distance and noise and hunger. This felt different. This felt like being measured. I brought the rig almost to a crawl. Nothing behind me on the ice road. No one ahead. Just me, my truck, and that thing in the lane. All right? I muttered, breath fogging the cab. You made your point. Move. Didn't. Its mouth opened a fraction, like it might bare its teeth. No sound came out. His breath didn't fog the air. At -30, even a wolf should have had steam pouring out of its jaws. There was nothing, just that unmoving body and those eyes catching every lumen from my lights. I decided I wasn't stopping completely for it. Not out there. Not at night. The road was wide enough on that stretch that I could edge past without splitting the ice load too badly. I checked my mirrors out of habit, flat emptiness. Then I eased the wheel left, nudging the truck just enough to give the thing room. As my bumper drew parallel, the wolf's head tracked me with that same jerky, delayed movement. My window passed within maybe 15 feet of it. Up close, the fur along its flank didn't look right. Too smooth, too uniform, like someone had taken a brush and painted on the idea of a coat instead of the real thing. The truck crept by. For a heartbeat, its eyes and mine were level. The cab felt smaller, pressing in around me, heater suddenly too loud. My fingers slickened on the wheel. Then I was past. The wolf slipped out of the direct beam, drifting into the edge of the light. I straightened back into the lane and eased back toward 50. The hair on my arms had just started to lie down when I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. Right side mirror. The wolf was trotting alongside my truck. Not running, not sprinting, trotting. Right there at my passenger door, out in the dark beyond the lane, matching my speed dead on. At 50 kilometers per hour, I'm used to seeing animals pacing vehicles for a bit. Dogs on reserve roads, deer spooked in fields, even wolves sprinting along plow berms before peeling off. There's a rhythm to it, bodies rising and falling, paws pounding, muscles working. This thing wasn't touching the ground. Its legs moved, sure, front and back, working through the motion of a run, but there was clear space between its paws and the surface of the ice. My headlights cut across enough that I could see it plain. A thin band of shadow separating it from the road, like it was gliding just above it. The cab went cold in a way that had nothing to do with the outside air. I glanced from the mirror to the speedometer. Needle steady at 50. Engine RPM right where it should be. No sudden wind gust, no ice shift. The truck was doing what it always did. The wolf kept pace exactly. When I sped up a little, it matched. When I eased off, it adjusted. Its body stayed perfectly parallel to the passenger door. No drifting back or surging ahead. The only thing that moved was its head, which turned in those unnerving, mechanical increments to keep its gaze angled toward the cab. My CB crackled. No voice, just a burst of static sharp enough to sting, followed by a low hum that made the plastic housing vibrate. The radio wasn't picking up anything from dispatch or other units. I could see the channel light steady, no one keying up. The hum deepened. For a second, it sounded like the same frequency as the engine under my feet, like the two were trying to sync. My fillings ached. I turned the volume knob down. The hum stayed exactly as loud as it had been. I kept my eyes on the road. The temptation to stare at the wolf, to watch every unnatural twitch, was strong as a magnet. But the ice didn't care what was happening beside me. A bad spot could send me sideways off the plowed path. So I used the mirror, quick glances, building the picture piece by piece. The more I looked, the less it resembled anything I'd learned about wolves. Its stride didn't compress or extend, no matter if the road under us was smooth or ridged. When we hit a seam where the ice had been reflooded and refrozen, my truck bounced slightly. Its body didn't. It stayed level, gliding forward like its feet were just for show. The shadow was wrong too. There should have been a dark smudge under it, warped by my headlights, stretched by angle and contour. Instead, there was a thin, blurred patch on the ice, like someone had sketched a suggestion of a shadow and then smudged it with their thumb. I breathed through my nose, slow and deliberate, trying to keep my hands from tightening any further. The heater blew against my knuckles, but my fingers felt like they were gripping ice. About a mile into this, the wind picked up. I watched snow devils spin across the road ahead, lit by my beams. The truck rocked slightly. In the mirror, the wolf's fur didn't react. No ruffling, no tugging. It might as well have been moving through a vacuum. Enough, I muttered, more to myself than to it. I eased my boot down, bringing us up over 60. The engine note climbed, trailer tugging slightly at the hitch. The gap between the stakes on the side of the road shortened in my peripheral vision. The road blurred a little more. The wolf didn't fall back, kept pace. Same distance, same angle, same impossible space between its paws and the ice. My chest felt tight. The wind outside whistled around the mirrors. A thin, high note. Somewhere in the dash, a loose panel buzzed. Over it all, the CB hummed like a live wire. I did something I don't normally do on that road. I started talking, not to it, to myself, out loud, counting mile markers, seconds between reflective stakes, names of towns I'd run years back. Anything to keep my brain tethered to the familiar while my eyes processed the impossible. The road curved slightly to the left. My headlights swept across the open ice, then found the stakes again. In that arc, the right side of the truck shifted closer to the drift. Any real animal keeping speed that close would have had to adjust, rise or fall, drift out, or risk clipping the bank. The wolf didn't adjust. It floated right through the faint thickening of snow near the edge, paws moving, body completely unaffected. Its shoulder passed through a small ridge without any displacement, like the drift was fog and it was more solid than the world it moved through. I felt sweat bead at the back of my neck under the collar of my jacket. The heater was still blowing, but I shivered. After nearly 2 miles of this, the road straightened out, climbing in a subtle, barely noticeable incline. The engine dug in a bit, pulling weight uphill. I watched the gauges more than I had to, an excuse to keep my eyes anywhere but the mirror. Then, without a sound, the presence beside me changed. You know the feeling of someone walking out of a room? how the air seems to loosen. The cab did that, pressure easing, space widening by a fraction. The hair on my arms began to settle. I risked a look in the mirror. The wolf was gone. No white shape, no shadow, just my trailer's flank and the dark beyond. A few wind-whipped snow snakes crossing the beam. I exhaled. A long breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding on to. My shoulders dropped a centimeter. The hum in the CB faded back into regular, innocent static when I finally turned the volume all the way down. I kept driving. 5 minutes later, I checked the mirror again out of habit. Empty. Then I saw it. Not beside me this time. Ahead. Dead center of the lane, maybe 200 meters out. Sitting on the ice. The same white body, the same unnatural stillness. It faced me, head slightly tilted, as if curious what I'd do now. Under my hands, the wheel felt suddenly too big, like I was trying to steer with gloves made of stone. My heartbeat thudded in my ears, drowning out some of the engine's noise. I eased off the throttle, brought us back to 50, then a touch less. I didn't honk this time, didn't try to go around. I just kept rolling, slow and steady, eyes flicking between the road, the wolf, and the speedometer. When I got within 20 meters, the thing rose to its feet in one fluid motion, no muscle shift, no gathering of weight. One instant it was sitting, the next it was standing, like someone cut from frame to frame. Its eyes caught my lights again. For a moment, I saw something in them that wasn't hunger or fear or the wild measure of a predator considering its odds. It was recognition, not of me, of the truck. The road, the situation, like I was playing out a script it knew by heart. Then it turned its head away, in that same disjointed, stepwise motion, and walked off to the left. This time actually touching the surface, paws pressing little impressions in the snow near the edge of the plowed strip. By the time I passed where it had been, it was gone. No shape, no tail disappearing into the night. Just wind-pushed snow and the indifferent, frozen channel stretching to the horizon. At the next camp, under buzzing fluorescence and the smell of frying grease, I asked one of the older drivers if he'd ever seen oversized white wolves on that stretch. He gave me a long look, then said sometimes the ice plays tricks with distance and shadow. Told me to get some sleep. I didn't argue. Later, in my bunk, I scrolled through dashcam footage on my phone. The road showed up fine, clear and merciless. My rig, the stakes, the night, no wolf. At the point where it should have been standing in the lane, the only anomaly was a slight distortion in the image. A shimmer in the air, like heat waves over asphalt on a summer highway. For a few frames, the headlights' beams bent around something that wasn't there, before straightening out again. In the clip where it ran beside me, there was nothing in the mirror view except the endless dark. But the accelerometer data, built into the cam, showed a subtle, rhythmic vibration along the truck's side, like something heavy was matching our movement in the blind spot, pushing air where there shouldn't have been any. I still run that road, still see real wolves sometimes, hanging back at the edges of the beam, eyes catching just enough light before they slip into the dark. Those don't bother me. What bothers me is when I catch a white shape in the corner of the mirror, keeping pace just a little too perfectly, and look over to find nothing but my own trailer and the night. Because whatever that thing was out there on the ice that night, it knew how fast I was going. It knew where to stand so I'd see it. It knew when to leave and when to come back. And it felt, in a way I can't explain, like it wasn't the first time it had done this. Or the last. I've been running loads through the Mackenzie Delta for over 12 years. Fuel, timber, sealed containers, you name it. I don't scare easy, not anymore. The Arctic teaches you early on that fear wastes heat, and heat is something you can't afford to spend. But what happened that night, I still feel the cold from it. This was midwinter 2 years back. I was hauling a loaded tank from Inuvik up toward the oil posts near Aklavik. A blizzard hit harder than expected, snow whipping sideways across the windshield, visibility down to maybe 10 meters on a good second. I was alone on the ice road at around 3 a.m., feeling that strange pressure in the cab you get when the storm dampens everything except the hum of the engine. Inside smelled like old diesel, thermos coffee, and the rubber stink of my winter boots drying under the heater vent. The dashboard cast a dull blue glow over the cab, and every so often the defroster hiccuped warm mist against the glass. Outside, white and black, nothing else. Even the reflective stakes along the road looked like ghosts, blurred shapes phasing in and out of my high beams. CB radio was dead. Too much static. Storms do that. The wind hum around the cab came in long, low waves, like something breathing just outside my window. I remember thinking, no one else is stupid enough to be out here right now. Then I saw lights in my side mirror. Two shaky beams in the distance, bouncing violently in the storm, getting closer. A snowmobile. I frowned. Nobody runs a snowmobile this far from the settlement during a whiteout. Not at this hour. Not without backup. It's suicide. But the headlamps kept coming. Jittery, frantic, and too fast for the conditions. Maybe a ranger, I muttered to myself. Or someone lost. I eased off the throttle, letting the rig drop a few km/h. The road vibrated under my hands. Snow danced in long horizontal streaks across the windshield. The snowmobile closed the gap quickly, too quickly. When it hit my rear lights, the engine scream cut through the storm like a chainsaw. Raw, uneven, blowing out and surging like the motor was being pushed past what it could handle. It tailed me for maybe 30 seconds, far too close, headlights flooding my mirrors with white glare. Then it swung out to the left. I gripped the wheel tighter, instinct tightening my throat. No one should pass a semi during a blizzard, not even on ice roads wide enough for two. But the snowmobile kept coming. Its engine howled as it pulled level with my cab. And the rider, God, his helmet visor was cracked open from the cold, split diagonally across the faceplate. Behind it, where a face should have been, there was only frost. A swirling mass of pale ice crystals twisting like smoke inside the helmet. No skin, no eyes, no breath fogging the air, just a hollow cavity of moving cold. The snowmobile's headlights jittered wildly, but the rider's head stayed fixed toward me, angled just enough to feel like he was staring straight into the cab. I remember the exact sound of my own breath catching. The snowmobile's skis weren't reacting to the snow. They didn't sink, didn't jolt on drifts. They skated across the surface like the machine weighed nothing. The rider's parka was shredded at the sleeves, fabric torn and stiff with ice. Snow whipped through the cracks in the clothing and into the helmet. But instead of melting, it joined whatever was swirling inside. The thing wasn't alive, but it sure as hell noticed me. I dropped my speed another notch, letting the rig steady itself. The snowmobile mirrored my pace, floating just outside my window. Its engine noise fluctuated in unnatural ways, sometimes loud as thunder, sometimes phasing into near silence like it was slipping underwater. I reached instinctively for my CB mic. Before I grabbed it, the snowmobile veered hard to the right, straight off the shoulder. I watched its headlights disappear instantly into the blizzard, swallowed by white chaos. Then nothing. No crash, no impact, just gone. I stared into the storm for a good 15 seconds, waiting to see another flicker of light. Nothing. My hands were shaking. I forced them to stay on the wheel. I considered stopping, but that thought died fast. No way in hell I was stepping out into that. I kept rolling, letting the rhythmic vibration of the road pull me back into focus. For the next hour, the blizzard beat against the cab in violent bursts. The wind made the trailer groan, each blast sending shivers through the frame. The cab lights flickered more than once. My nerves didn't settle, not fully. And then, I glanced at my mirror. The snowmobile was behind me again, 100 meters back, moving smooth, light steady, like nothing had happened, like it hadn't just launched itself into a ravine no living rider could survive. Adrenaline hit me like a punch. I swore under my breath and wiped my palms on my jeans. The storm had softened a little, just enough for me to lock eyes with the impossible. The snowmobile stayed at a fixed distance. No bouncing, no weaving, just gliding in my wake like a shadow following its owner. I sped up. I sped up. I slowed down. I slowed down. Kilometer after kilometer, it stayed there, eyes of its headlamps boring into the back of my rig. By the time I reached the turnoff toward the Aklavik access road, My fingers were numb from gripping the wheel too hard. Frost gathered on the inside of my windshield. The heater couldn't keep up with the sudden cold sinking into the cab. Eventually, 20 minutes later, it was gone again. No sound, no flicker, just vanished. When I hit camp at dawn, my legs almost buckled when I climbed out of the truck. The sky looked bruised purple behind the storm clouds. The air smelled like diesel and pine from the generator hut. Inside the shack, after logging in my drop, I pulled the SD card from my dash cam. I had to know I wasn't losing my mind. I loaded the footage. The snowmobile wasn't there. Not beside me. Not passing me. Not launching itself into the ravine. Not following me. Nothing but blizzard, road, and empty ice. But at the 43-minute mark, where I remembered seeing it tailing me, the audio spiked. Not the engine. Not the wind. A deep, grinding sound like metal scraping frozen ground. Then a voice, buried under layers of distortion. You didn't stop. I slammed the laptop shut so fast it echoed in the small room. Later, when I walked back to my truck, the frost on my driver's side window had formed a pattern. A jagged streak like the outline of a cracked visor. I scraped it off with my glove, but the glass felt colder than the rest. Like something had pressed its face to it during the night. I still run that route, blizzard or not. Work doesn't stop for nightmares. But whenever the storm thickens and my mirrors start to fog, I fight every instinct screaming at me not to look. Because I know what I'll see if I do. 2 shaking headlights, a cracked visor, a hollow face full of moving frost, and an engine that howls only for me. I've been hauling up the Dalton Highway for 20 years, long enough that places like Coldfoot feel more like checkpoints in a recurring dream than real locations on a map. You see the same faces, hear the same stories, watch the same storms roll in from the Brooks Range like ghost waves. Nothing usually surprises me anymore, but sometimes it's the quiet places that get you. This happened last winter, mid-January, just after midnight. I'd pushed hard through Adigan Pass during a clearing window and rolled into Coldfoot to top off and get something hot in my system. The cafe was still open, the overnight shift, lights humming that yellowish tint like an old motel lobby. Inside smelled like burnt coffee, fryer oil, wet jackets, and that faint metallic scent you get when snow melts off boots. A couple pipeline guys were at the counter eating burgers. One waitress was wiping down a table, humming. The heater blasted dry warmth that hit me right in the face as I stepped inside. I took my usual spot, a booth against the wall with a direct view of the front door and the big window overlooking the parking lot. Habit. I like to see who's coming and going. I ordered chili and black coffee, the kind that's strong enough to peel rust off a bumper. The place was quiet, peaceful. Then the man in the old parka sat down across from me. He didn't ask, didn't gesture, didn't even pull out the chair. 1 second the booth was empty. The next he was there, lowering himself into the seat without a sound. I looked up, surprised. His parka was an ancient green military-style shell, the kind with the fur-lined hood and patched elbows. Snow dust clung to the shoulders. Frost glittered in the seams. His gloves sat on the table, palms up, like he'd laid out hands made of leather. He didn't blink. His eyes were glassy, pale blue, washed out, unfocused but somehow looking directly at me. You all right, buddy? I asked. No answer. Steam rose from the coffee mug in front of him. I hadn't seen it there when he sat down. The waitress hadn't brought it. It just existed now, faint curls drifting upward. He didn't touch it, didn't move, didn't breathe. I felt the hairs on my arms stand up under my jacket. The chili arrived, placed in front of me with a polite clatter. The waitress didn't even look at the man across from me, didn't acknowledge him at all. She walked away humming, completely oblivious. Cleared my throat. You waiting for someone? No answer, just those pale eyes staring right through me. Something about the way he sat bothered me. His shoulders were too straight, his chin too still, not stiff like a person sitting upright, stiff like something posed in place. I checked the cafe reflection in the window beside me. The booths, the counter, the waiting truckers, everything looked normal. But his reflection wasn't there. Only mine. I gripped the edge of the table tighter. The faint vibration of the cafe's refrigerator hummed up through the floor. My breath fogged the air just slightly. Too cold in here for comfort. His breath didn't fog at all. I took a spoonful of chili just to force myself to move. When I blinked, he was gone. The chair across from me was empty. The gloves were gone. The coffee remained, steaming lightly. My heart kicked hard against my ribs. No one had walked past me. No one had gone outside. The door hadn't opened. I rubbed my eyes and looked around. The pipeline guys, the waitress, the cook. They were acting like nothing was wrong. I tried to shake it off. Chalk it up to fatigue, long hours, and the kind of cold that makes your brain shiver inside your skull. After a few more sips of coffee, I paid my bill, tugged on my jacket, and stepped back out into the night. Coldfoot's parking area stretched out like a black sheet of ice under weak floodlights. Snow drifted low and thin, creeping along the asphalt like mist. My truck, a blue Kenworth W900, sat idling quietly in its spot. Exhaust steamed in slow pulses from the stacks. Then I froze. He was standing behind my truck. Same parka, same rigid stance, same pale, unblinking eyes. The fur-lined hood lifted ever so slightly in the faint breeze. But the man himself didn't move. Not an inch. He was just staring. A knot formed in my stomach. My boots crunched loudly on the thin crust of snow as I approached. But he didn't react. He didn't look away. Just watched me with those empty eyes. Like I was a point he was fixed to. I raised a hand. Listen, I don't know what you want. But before I finished the sentence, the truck's engine hiccuped. A sharp cough, a sputter. Then it smoothed out again. The man didn't blink. I took a step back, instinct pulling me away rather than forward. My breath fogged the air in front of me, then drifted sideways in the wind. His breath never showed. The snow around his boots was untouched. Not compressed. Not disturbed. Just perfectly smooth. I swallowed hard and kept moving toward the driver's side door, forcing myself not to run. My keys jingled in my grip. My hands felt numb from something that wasn't the cold. When I reached the cab, my side mirror gave me a clear angle of the man behind the truck. He was still there, still staring, still frozen in place like a column of ice. I climbed in, shut the door, and locked it out of pure instinct. The cab felt strangely warm, almost claustrophobic. Dash lights glowed soft green. The engine rumbled steady beneath me. I flipped on my headlights, bathing the parking lot in bright white. The man was gone. The beam hit nothing but drifting snow and the metal siding of the cafe. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my throat. I put the truck in gear, rolled out of the lot, and tried to calm my breathing. The road south stretched ahead, empty, silent, black. My headlights carved long tunnels through the snow haze. I didn't see him again that night. Not on the Dalton. Not in the mirrors. But the next morning at Pump Station 6, I mentioned it to one of the local staff. A mechanic who'd been around longer than me. Just a casual testing question. He froze mid-sip of his coffee. "What did he look like?" he asked quietly. I described the parka, the frost in the seams, the pale eyes, the stillness. The mechanic set his mug down, hand trembling just a little. "We buried a driver last winter," he said. "Died in the cab during a cold snap. Found him frozen solid in that same jacket. Same hood. Same everything." My stomach dropped. The mechanic leaned in. "He was headed north. Same night you were. They say he wasn't ready to stop driving yet." I didn't say anything. Didn't need to. Later that week, back in Fairbanks, I checked my dashcam footage. Frame by frame through the Coldfoot parking lot. My truck. The snow. The lights from the cafe. At the timestamp when I remember seeing him clear as day, there's nothing in the shot. No man. No parka. Just a faint outline of frost drifting in the exact shape of a person, then dissolving into the wind. I still run the Dalton. Still stop at Coldfoot sometimes. But I don't sit in that booth anymore. And I never, ever look too long at the parked trucks with frost creeping across their windows. Some drivers, it turns out, don't really leave the road, even after they're long gone. People think the scariest parts of this job are the storms and the wrecks. Ask anyone who hasn't driven a rig and they'll tell you about jackknifed trailers on black ice, or tornadoes crossing the interstate, or some idiot four-wheeler cutting you off in the rain. And sure, those'll kill you quick if you're not careful. What they don't talk about is the quiet nights, when the world goes just a little bit wrong and there's no one around to tell you it didn't. My name's Ryan Cole. I've been running long haul out of Texas and Oklahoma for 20 years. Mostly I-35, I-40, and all the little state routes that stitch them together. I've pulled reefers full of meat, dry vans full of paper, hazmat tankers with stuff I didn't want to think too hard about. The night I'm talking about, all I had was a half-full dry van of cleaning supplies, headed east through Oklahoma. Nothing special. Nothing dangerous. At least that's what I thought. It was late spring 3 years back. One of those hot, windy days where the sky looks bleached out and the air tastes like dust. By the time the sun went down, thunderstorms were building on the horizon, big Enville tops flashing way off in the distance. I left Oklahoma City after dark, planning to run a few hours east on I-40 before grabbing my 10 at a truck stop. Dispatch was in my ear earlier about staying on schedule, but there was wiggle room. Night run, clear road, nothing I hadn't done 100 times. My rig then was a red Freightliner Cascadia, 10-speed, about 800,000 on the clock. She rattled a little on rough pavement, but she pulled steady. I knew where the dash squeaked and which gauge stuck in winter. CB on 19, volume low. Couple guys arguing about a ball game, somebody complaining about a DOT bear near the scales. Normal nighttime noise. The sky over the highway was a dull black dome. No moon, just a smear of stars between thin clouds. Off to the south, lightning flickered inside tall clouds like someone was welding behind a curtain. About an hour out, the first town went dark. I saw it from a distance, just a small smear of orange on the horizon. Nothing big. As I got closer, that smear flickered. A few lights blinked out, came back, then all dropped at once. Gas station sign, dead. Streetlights, dead. The little green glow from someone's TV in a trailer window, gone. The only light left was what my truck was making. Rolling blackout, I told myself. Grid can't keep up with those AC units. I'd heard about it on the radio earlier, some heat advisory, power companies asking folks to cut back. Didn't think much of it. These days, there's always some infrastructure problem. But 5 miles later, another cluster of lights went out. This time I watched it happen. A row of sodium lights along a frontage road winked off one after the other, like a wave moving west to east. The glow above a small town guttered and disappeared, leaving the horizon clean and black. The CB chatter thinned. One guy cut out mid-sentence. Then another. The hiss under everything faded until it was just a faint, dry whisper. My headlights suddenly felt very small. The air through the vents cooled a notch. Outside temps still red in the low 70s. But there was a metallic edge to the breeze now, a smell like hot wires and rain on concrete. I told myself it was in my head. Long day, too much caffeine, storm haze. Then the overhead signs went dark. You don't realize how much you rely on those until they're gone. Out of nowhere, the glowing green overhead markers were just rectangles of darker shadow. The little white reflectors on the posts caught my beams, but the signs themselves were blind. Up ahead, an overpass loomed. Just another concrete bridge carrying some county road over the interstate. I'd driven under that kind of thing 1,000 times without thinking about it. This time, the darkness under it looked thicker than the rest. The way my headlights hit it bothered me. They touched the road, the guardrails, the lip of the shoulder, and then the light just sort of slid off the space between the pillars. It wasn't a clean cut, the way it looks when a beam doesn't quite reach. It was more like there was something there drinking the light up. At the same time, the CB finally quit. No click, no pop. Just a small, final thinning of static into nothing, like someone had closed a door. I checked the dash clock. 12:14 a.m. Thunder rumbled far off to the south. A rational part of me said, "Keep going. Bridges are safe." Don't stop in a blackout. Don't park on the shoulder unless you have to. Another part, older, quieter, suggested that being under tons of concrete in a lightning storm might not be the worst place to wait things out, especially if the grid was about to have a bad night. I saw my exit option coming up, a wide patch of gravel under that overpass, used as an emergency pull-off. I'd seen guys nap under there during heat waves. My blinker ticked in the hush way too loud. I eased off the throttle and pulled under the bridge. The instant my steers crossed into the shadow, the air temperature dropped. Not a gentle fade. One breath I was inhaling warm, dry Oklahoma night. The next I was swallowing air that felt like it had passed through a walk-in cooler. Goosebumps crawled up my arms under my t-shirt. My fingers went cold on the wheel. The smell changed, too. The burn dust highway smell vanished, replaced by wet concrete and something like river mud, damp, metallic, old. I set the brake, dropped it into neutral, and let the engine idle. The thrum felt muted, like it was happening a little way away instead of right in front of me. Outside, the blackout had gone total. No farm lights, no town glow, no reflector posts lit except the ones in my immediate beams. Above the bridge, the sky was a blank slab of dark. I flicked my headlights off, figuring I'd save my eyes and not blind anyone else who might pull in. The second the beams died, I regretted it. The darkness under that overpass was heavy. There's night and then there's absence. This was absence. My cab, with its faint dash glows and sleeping bunk outline, was a little capsule of dim color swallowed in a black that didn't feel like sky or road. The space between the pillars out front might as well have been a wall. I told myself I was being stupid. I reached for the switch to flick the lights back on. That's when I realized I wasn't alone under the bridge. At first I thought it was just my eyes adjusting. The brain does that thing where it invents shapes in the dark. A bush becomes a person, a signpost becomes an animal. You learn to ignore it. But this shape didn't go away. Between the middle set of pillars, a darker patch of black crouched low, like a shadow that had forgotten how to lie flat. It was wide at the base, humped toward the middle, edges soft and wrong. If you squinted, it could have been a big boulder someone had dumped in the median decades ago. Except there weren't any rocks like that around here. Just prairie and concrete. I froze with my hand halfway to the lights. The shape moved. Not sideways. Not toward me. It moved in and out, as if something enormous under the bridge was breathing. The top of it rose a few inches, then sank. The sides expanded, then drew in. Slow, deliberate breaths. Too slow for anything living. Too deliberate for wind. The urge to throw the truck in gear and get the hell out nearly overwhelmed me. But a quieter, nastier thought crept in. If that thing is real, if it's attached to the bridge somehow, do you really want to drive under it while it's awake? I told myself one burst of light would clear it all up. Just enough to see that it was a trick of concrete and shadow and nerves. I flipped the headlights on. They flashed for half a second, then died. In that strobe of illumination, I saw three things. One, the shape wasn't a boulder. It was closer to the cab now. Not by much, but enough that its edges overlapped with painted lane markers that had been clear a moment before, like it had slid forward between one breath and the next. Two, there was texture along its surface. Not fur, not scales. More like overlapping folds of thick, matte material, layered shadows that didn't match the lines of the bridge. And in the depth of those folds, hints of movement, like something shifting under a heavy blanket. Three, the nearest bridge pillar had a hairline crack in it that hadn't been there when I'd pulled in. A thin, pale line visible just above my hood. Then the beams cut out and I was blind again. The dash lights flickered once. The radio screen went black. The CB, already silent, lost even its hiss. The only light left in my world was the faint green glow of the ignition ring and the dim backlight of the speedometer. And that shape kept breathing. I don't know how to explain the sound it made, because sound isn't quite right. There was no wheeze, no growl. Instead, every time it expanded, the steering wheel went a little lighter in my hands. Every time it contracted, something deep in the frame shivered. It was like the air pressure in the space changed with each slow inhale and exhale. The smell of wet concrete got stronger. Beneath it, a new scent rose, metallic and cold, like the inside of a culvert after a flood. I tried the headlights again, flicked the switch off on. Nothing. Tried the hazards. No clicking. No flash on the dash. I sat there in a tiny pool of half-light, listening to the bridge breathe. Then the lights came on by themselves. No input from me. No movement of my hand. One moment I was in murk. The next the headlights blazed, high beams punching forward. They stayed on for maybe one heartbeat. The thing was closer. It now filled the entire gap between the two middle pillars, crawling up them in a smear of living shadow. Its surface, if you can call it that, seemed to sag and climb at the same time, folds dragging down even as new ones layered up. I couldn't see eyes or a mouth. What I saw were indentations forming along its front, like fingertips pressing into sand from the far side. Those indentations were deepening in the direction of my truck. The nearest pillar's crack was wider now, a white scar running diagonally across its midsection. Dust flaked from it in tiny drifts. Every instinct screamed at me to turn the wheel, punch the gas, do anything. The lights cut out again. Total black. The engine hummed, muffled and wrong. The steering wheel's normal vibration faded until it felt almost dead under my hands. My breath fogged in the cab. For a long moment, might have been 30 seconds, might have been 5, nothing changed. No flicker, no sound but the thump of my heart and that impossible breathing. Then the beams popped on a third time. I didn't mean to, but I yelped. The thing was nearly at the nose of my truck. Still didn't have a face, not exactly, but its front edge had pulled into a rough curve, a bulging of shadow that suggested a head lowering toward me. The indentations were clearer now, spread wide, sunk deep into the concrete pillar on my left. 5 of them, a hand shape, massive. Each finger dug into the pillar like a scoop. Concrete pushed inward instead of outward. The crack I'd seen before ran across the middle of that palm shape, stress radiating from where the weight pressed in. The folds of its body clung to the underside of the bridge, squeezing, making the heavy concrete look suddenly fragile. The air in the cab felt sucked out. My ears popped painfully. Something deep in the structure groaned. Not in the dramatic Hollywood way, but in a subtle, grinding tone, like rebar complaining. The thing's front edge inched closer, and for the first time I had a clear sense of its size. It was big enough that if it peeled fully off the bridge, it could have wrapped around my cab and most of the trailer in one motion. My hand finally broke free of whatever fear had glued it to the wheel. I slammed the shifter into gear and stomped the accelerator. The engine roared. The truck didn't move. It felt like my wheels had sunk into setting concrete. The tatch climbed, gears engaged, but there was no forward roll. The motion of the engine translated into a kind of vibration through the cab that made my teeth hurt, but the landscape outside stayed fixed. My headlights flickered, dimmed, brightened, dimmed again. Each time they flared, the thing's front edge was closer by a few inches. Now it hung just ahead of my bumper, folds trembling as if amused. I saw the concrete under my steers quiver. Tiny fractures spidered out from where rubber met road, like something below the pavement was pushing up and in. The smell got worse. Ozone, wet stone, something old and cold and buried. For a second, and I hate admitting this, I closed my eyes, just squeezed them shut and waited for the impact, the crunch, the feeling of being wrapped in that impossible weight. Instead, everything went absolutely still. No breathing, no hum, no light. Then the world snapped back. Headlights blazing, dash fully lit, radio mid-song, CB hissing with some distant driver's half-heard joke. Outside, the blackout was over. The sky above the bridge gleamed faintly with reflected light from distant towns. A red tower beacon blinked on the horizon. Off in the distance, someone's barn floodlight burned steady. My truck lurched forward like a rope had been cut, almost hopping as the tires found free motion again. I slammed the brake instinctively, heart in my throat. The space between the pillars was empty. No shadow, no breathing, just concrete, dirt, a scattering of gravel. The only sign that anything was wrong was the crack. The pillar on my left, The one that had taken the brunt of that hand now sported a fresh, ugly fracture running diagonally across its face. The concrete around it was dusted on the ground in a fan pattern. Embedded in that dust, very faintly, were 5 curved impressions. Not deep, not dramatic, just enough that if you stood where I was and looked up, you'd see a shape that suggested fingers. I stared at it for too long. A set of headlights appeared in my mirror then, ordinary ones. A pickup, local plates, rumbling along like the night had never hiccuped. That broke the spell. I eased off the brake and pulled back onto the highway. My hands shook on the wheel. My mouth tasted like pennies. I drove to the next truck stop and parked under as many lights as I could find. Didn't sleep much that morning. Every time a truck rolled past on the interstate and the building vibrated, my body tensed like I was back under that bridge. Next week, on a sunny afternoon with a trainer riding along, I made an excuse to take the same route. Told him I wanted to avoid construction on another stretch. We passed under that overpass in daylight, and I watched the pillars like a hawk. The crack was there, clean, white as bone against the gray concrete. New enough that it hadn't collected much grime. The pattern of dust around the base had been disturbed by wind and rain since, but I still thought I saw the ghost of those 5 arcs in the staining. My trainer glanced up, shrugged. "Gonna need to fix that at some point," he said. "These old bridges are tired." I didn't argue. Now, whenever there's talk of rolling blackouts in Oklahoma, I plan my runs differently. I keep moving under overpasses. I don't park in their shadows, no matter how bad the storm looks. And on quiet nights, when I do have to stop under one, when there's no shoulder and no exits and nowhere else to go, I leave my headlights on even if it's wasteful, because I know how it felt when they flickered. And I know that somewhere out along that stretch, there's a bridge with a handprint in it, pressed from the outside in. I still feel that slow, heavy breathing every time the CB goes silent and the world under the concrete gets just a little too cold.